I never thought I'd be the villain in my own child's story. The realization hit me yesterday as I watched her pack her belongings into a single suitcase. Everything she could take from the life I'd carefully constructed for her. Her shoulders hunched with determination, eyes deliberately avoiding mine. The silence between us was deafening, filled with 18 years of love that had somehow curdled into control. And standing in her doorway, I finally saw myself through her eyes. I've always believed that good parenting meant building walls. Not to trap, but to protect. My own childhood taught me that the world is merciless to those unprepared for its harshness. My parents were immigrants who arrived with nothing but determination and the clothes on their backs. They worked themselves to exhaustion, sacrificed everything, so that I would never know the hunger they experienced, the constant fear of displacement that shadowed their lives. I grew up watching them take every precaution, calculate every risk, reject any path that wasn't absolutely secure. Security first, my father would say, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had known true insecurity. Everything else is luxury. I internalized their caution as wisdom, their fear as prudence. When my child was born, I promised myself I would build something unshakable for her, a foundation so secure that she would never have to worry about the things that kept me up at night. I channeled all my energy into creating stability, financial security, educational opportunities, a clear path forward. Everything meticulously planned and vetted. The early years were simple. She was a bright, curious child who trusted my guidance completely. I can still remember her small hand in mine, her eyes looking up at me with unwavering faith that I knew best. And I believed I did. Every decision I made was filtered through the prism of her future security. Which schools would provide the best opportunities? Which activities would look best on applications? Which friends came from stable families? I was constructing her future brick by careful brick. I didn't notice the subtle shifts at first. The way her smile became more measured, her enthusiasm more contained. The questions that began with what if, that I dismissed as impractical daydreams. I was too focused on the blueprint I'd created to see that she was trying to draw her own. Our life was comfortable, more than comfortable. We had privileges my parents could never have imagined. A spacious home in an exclusive neighborhood, private education, family vacations to carefully selected destinations that combined relaxation with cultural enrichment. All the trappings of success. I thought I was giving her everything. I didn't realize what I was taking away. The first real conflict emerged when she was 14. She wanted to attend a summer arts program instead of the advanced mathematics course I had registered her for. Art was a hobby, I explained patiently. Mathematics was a foundation for real success. She argued passionately about her love for creative expression, how she lost track of time when drawing, how colors and shapes spoke to her in ways equations never could. I listened with mounting frustration. This wasn't in the plan. Art doesn't offer security. Art doesn't guarantee a comfortable life. I had watched too many talented people struggle, too many dreams crumble under the weight of practical necessity. I would not let her build her future on such a precarious foundation. You can draw in your free time, I told her. But your education comes first. She attended the mathematics course. Her grades were perfect, as always. But something had changed in how she looked at me. A distance had formed, small at first, but growing steadily with each decision I made for her, instead of with her. I told myself it was normal teenage rebellion, that she would understand my wisdom when she was older, when the comfort and security I had ensured for her became apparent against the backdrop of her peers' struggles. I was so certain that one day she would thank me. The math course was just the beginning. As high school progressed, the conflicts increased in frequency and intensity. She wanted to take photography instead of another science. She wanted to spend weekends volunteering at an animal shelter instead of attending the college prep seminars I had researched. She wanted to apply to arts colleges instead of the prestigious universities where my connections could help secure her admission. Each time, I redirected her. Sometimes with gentle persuasion, sometimes with firm insistence, occasionally with thinly veiled threats about my financial support. I convinced myself this was love. That sometimes love means saying no to protect someone from their own naive choices. Meanwhile, I watched with mounting anxiety as some of her classmates made what I considered reckless decisions. Gap years to find themselves. Majors in fields with uncertain career prospects. Study abroad programs in countries with political instability or inferior educational standards. I congratulated myself for keeping my child on the right path, even as her resistance grew stronger. "You don't understand what it's like to be me," she said once, during a particularly heated argument about college applications. "You've never tried to." The words stung because there was truth in them. I understood the person I wanted her to be, the life I wanted her to have. But perhaps I had stopped seeing the person she actually was. By her senior year of high school, we were living in parallel realities. In mine, I was a devoted parent guiding a talented but somewhat impulsive child toward a secure and prosperous future. In hers, well, I can only piece this together now, from things she's said and letters she's written. She was suffocating under the weight of expectations that had nothing to do with her own desires or identity. She began to withdraw. The stray student who had once eagerly shared school projects became secretive about her work. The child who had called me at the slightest discomfort now handled problems without a word. She spent more time in her room, door firmly closed. When we did speak, conversations were polite but superficial. She had built a wall between us, transparent enough that I could see her but couldn't reach her. I mistook her withdrawal for maturity, her silence for acceptance, her compliance for agreement. I was so focused on the external markers of success, her GPA, her extracurricular achievements, her college acceptances, that I missed the internal collapse. The cracks in my perfect construction became impossible to ignore when I found the applications. She had been applying to art schools and study abroad programs behind my back. Worse, she had been corresponding with my estranged sister, the family rebel who had chosen a creative, unstable life that my parents had warned against. My sister, who lived in a small apartment filled with books and art, instead of a respectable home in a good neighborhood. My sister, who had offered to help my daughter pursue her own path, even if it meant defying me. The betrayal cut deep. Not just that she had gone behind my back, but that she had been planning her escape from the life I had so carefully constructed. All those late nights I had spent researching schools, calling in favors from colleagues, creating opportunities. She had been systematically rejecting all of it, building her own hidden infrastructure of freedom. I confronted her with the evidence of her deception, expecting remorse. Instead, she met my anger with a calm certainty that was somehow more devastating. "I knew you wouldn't listen," she said. "You never really have. I've done everything for you," I countered, my voice rising with indignation. "Everything I've ever done has been for your future." "No," she said quietly. "It's been for your idea of my future, not mine." The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. Years of suppressed resentment poured out of her. Every decision I had overruled. Every interest I had dismissed. Every time I substituted my judgment for hers. She painted a picture of childhood and adolescence I didn't recognize. One where her voice had been systematically silenced, her autonomy undermined, her individuality treated as a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be nurtured. "You don't even know who I am," she said, her voice breaking. "You've been so busy trying to shape me into what you think I should be, that you never bothered to see who I actually am." I defended myself fiercely, reminded her of all I had sacrificed for her, the opportunities I had created, the security I had ensured. I warned her about the harsh realities waiting in the world she was so eager to embrace. The competitive job market, the economic uncertainty, the regrets she would have when she saw her peers advancing in stable careers, while she struggled with student debt and limited prospects. "I'd rather struggle doing something I love than succeed at something that makes me miserable," she said. "I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours." The conversation ended in stalemate. She retreated to her room. I retreated to my study. Both of us wounded, neither willing to concede. In the days that followed, an uneasy truce settled over our home. We moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing temporary accommodations. I hoped it was a phase, that she would come to her senses once the emotions settled. I even began researching universities with strong arts programs attached to more practical majors, a compromise I thought she would eventually appreciate. What I didn't expect was the email from my sister. My daughter had not only been accepted to an arts program abroad, but had been offered a partial scholarship. My sister had agreed to cover the remaining costs and provide housing during breaks. They had orchestrated this entire plan without my knowledge or consent. And my daughter was leaving in 3 weeks. The revelation left me reeling. My first instinct was to forbid it outright. She was still legally under my authority. I could prevent her from getting a passport, withhold permission for her to travel internationally. I could cut off my sister completely, make it clear that any interference with my parenting would result in permanent estrangement. I spent a sleepless night weighing my options, fueled by a mixture of hurt, betrayal, and fear. By morning, I had settled on what I believed was a reasonable approach. I would present the facts calmly, explain why this plan was impractical, unnecessary, and potentially harmful. Offer the compromise of a well-respected local university with an arts program. Frame it as meeting her halfway. I rehearsed my arguments carefully, gathered brochures and financial projections, prepared to be the rational, measured parent, guiding an emotional teenager away from a mistake. But when I entered her room that morning, the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't defiance or rebellion I saw there. It was resignation. The quiet certainty of someone who has given up on being heard. And in that moment, something inside me fractured. "You've already made up your mind," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded slowly. "I have to do this. I have to find out who I am when I'm not trying to be who you want me to be." The words hit me like physical blows. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I had been so focused on protecting her from making what I considered mistakes, that I hadn't allowed her the dignity of making her own choices. I had been preparing her for a life I valued, not discovering what she valued. The 3 weeks before her departure were a strange limbo. We moved around each other with forced politeness. I helped with practical arrangements, vaccination records, banking details, winter clothing for a climate she had never experienced. But an invisible barrier remained between us. Too many words left unsaid. Too much hurt on both sides. The day she left, I drove her to the airport in silence. Watched as she checked in her single suitcase. Stood awkwardly as she said goodbye, neither of us quite knowing how to bridge the chasm that had formed. I wanted to beg her to stay. To promise I would listen better, support her dreams, be the parent she needed, instead of the one I thought she should have. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped behind years of certainty that I knew best. Instead, I hugged her stiffly and told her to be careful, to call when she landed, that I would always be here if she needed me. She nodded, her eyes already focused on the security checkpoint, on the life waiting beyond it. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving me standing alone with the weight of my good intentions. The house felt cavernous after she left. I wandered from room to room, noticing for the first time how much of our home reflected my tastes, my priorities, my vision. Her room was the only space that truly showed her personality, and even that had been a negotiation. The practical furniture I had selected, decorated with the posters and photographs she had chosen. A compromise that suddenly seemed symbolic of our entire relationship. I found myself sitting on her bed, looking at the artifacts of her life. The sketchbooks I had discouraged her from spending too much time on. The camera I had purchased as a birthday gift, but criticized her for using too often. The walls covered with images of places she dreamed of seeing, dreams I had dismissed as impractical fantasies. For the first time, I allowed myself to really look at her art. Not with the critical eye of a parent concerned about college applications and career prospects, but with openness to seeing what she was trying to express. The images were startling in their emotion and technical skill. Landscapes that captured not just places but feelings. Portraits that revealed character in subtle gestures. Abstract pieces that somehow conveyed complex emotions through color and form. This was not the work of someone with a casual hobby. This was the work of an artist, one with a unique vision and voice. One who had persisted despite my constant redirection toward more practical pursuits. My phone buzzed with a text. She had landed safely. The message was brief, factual. No emotion, no details about her first impressions. Just the minimum communication required. I started typing a response several times, deleting each attempt. What could I say now that would bridge the gap between us? How could I express in a text message that I was beginning to see how wrong I had been? In the end, I simply wrote, "Thank you for letting me know. I hope your first day goes well." The weeks that followed were a period of painful self-reflection. I threw myself into work at first, trying to fill the void her absence had created. But in quiet moments, her words returned to haunt me. "You don't even know who I am." The accusation echoed in the empty house, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths. Had I really been so blind? So convinced of my own rightness that I couldn't see the damage I was doing? I began to review our relationship through a different lens, cataloging moments when I had dismissed her preferences, redirected her interests, subtly and not so subtly shaped her toward my vision of success. The evidence was damning. Time after time, I had prioritized my definition of her best interests over her own expressed desires. I had framed love as control, protection as limitation, all with absolute conviction that I was doing the right thing, the only thing a good parent could do. Our communication during those first months was sparse and superficial. Weekly video calls where she showed me her living space, mentioned classes in vague terms, asked polite questions about home. She seemed different, more confident, more animated when describing her new experiences, though still guarded with me. I sensed she was editing her life for my consumption, sharing only what she thought I would approve of, or, at least, not criticize. 3 months after she left, a package arrived from her. Inside was a stack of letters, dozens of them, written over the years, but never sent. Letters she had written to me since she was 12 years old, documenting her struggles, her dreams, her growing sense that she could never be enough as herself. Reading them was like watching a slow-motion collapse of the relationship I thought we had. Age 12. Dad, I got the highest score on my math test today. I thought you would be really proud, but when I showed you, you just asked why I missed the one question. I worked so hard, and it still wasn't good enough. Age 14. I wish I could tell you how much I love drawing. When I'm making art, I feel like the real me. But whenever I show you something I've created, you just say it's very nice, and ask if I've finished my science homework. Age 15. Today at Career Day, the visiting artist talked about finding your passion. I wanted to tell you how it made me feel, like someone finally understood. But I know you would just say that passion doesn't pay bills. Sometimes I wonder if you've ever been passionate about anything. Age 16. I've stopped telling you about the things that matter to me. It hurts too much when you dismiss them. I'm becoming someone different around you. Someone quieter. Someone who agrees. Someone who doesn't exist when you're not looking. Age 17. I think you love the idea of me more than the actual me. I'm not sure you even see the difference anymore. The most recent letter was dated just before she left. I'm not leaving because I don't love you. I'm leaving because I need to find out if I can love myself. You built your life around giving me security, but what I needed was freedom. Freedom to discover who I am, not who you think I should be. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't rejection. It's the only way I know to become someone who might someday come back. I read the letters over and over, each word, a knife cutting away at the self-image I had maintained. The caring parent, the wise guide, the selfless provider. In their place stood someone else, someone so convinced of their own rightness that they couldn't see the person right in front of them, slowly disappearing. I spent the night writing my own letter. Tore it up. Wrote another. Tore that up too. No words seemed adequate to address the harm I had done. No apology sufficient to bridge the years of feeling unheard, unseen, unloved for who she truly was. In the end, I sent a simple message. I received your letters. I'm listening now. Really listening. Whenever you're ready to talk about anything, I'm here. She didn't respond immediately. A week passed. Then, too, I began to fear that my acknowledgement had come too late, that the damage was too extensive for repair. When she finally called, her voice was cautious. Did you mean what you said? About listening? Yes, I said, fighting the urge to qualify or explain or defend. Just listening. Something I was only beginning to understand I had never truly done. She spoke hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence as I remained silent, absorbing without interrupting. She told me about her classes, the techniques she was learning, the teachers who saw promise in her work, the friends who shared her passion for creation, the city she was exploring, so different from the sheltered environment I had maintained. When she finished, the silence stretched between us. She was waiting, I realized, for the criticism, the warnings, the subtle undermining that had been my habitual response to anything that deviated from my plan for her. It sounds wonderful, I said finally. You sound happy. I am, she admitted. For the first time, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. The conversation marked the beginning of a slow, painstaking reconstruction. Not of the relationship we had, that was built on fundamentally unequal ground, but of something new. Something that acknowledged her as an adult, making her own choices, and me, as a parent, learning to support, rather than direct. It wasn't easy. Old habits resurfaced regularly. I would catch myself about to offer unsolicited advice, to question her choices, to subtly remind her of the more secure path she had rejected. Each time, I had to consciously step back, reminding myself that my role had changed, needed to change, if I wanted any relationship with her at all. Our weekly calls gradually became more relaxed, more genuine. She began to share more freely, not just the successes but the struggles, the assignment she was finding challenging, the homesickness that occasionally overwhelmed her, the uncertainty about her future that sometimes kept her awake at night. I listened, offered support without direction, asked questions without hidden agendas. Slowly, tentatively, she began to ask for my input, not as the authority who would decide for her, but as someone whose perspective she valued, even when she might ultimately choose differently. 6 months after she left, she invited me to visit, to see her new world, meet her friends, attend an exhibition where some of her work would be displayed. The invitation was both an olive branch and a test. Would I enter her territory with respect, or would I use the visit to reassert control? I remember every detail of that first visit. The nervous anticipation as the plane landed. The strange disorientation of seeing her waiting at arrivals, familiar yet somehow transformed. The awkward hug that gave way to genuine warmth as we both relaxed into the reality of being together again. She had prepared a careful itinerary for my visit. A tour of her school. Meals with friends she had mentioned in our calls. Cultural sites she thought I would appreciate. And, centerpiece of the trip, the student exhibition where 3 of her pieces would be displayed. Watching her navigate this world she had created for herself was revelatory. She moved with confidence I had never seen at home, spoke with passion about techniques and concepts I barely understood, introduced me to friends and teachers with pride, rather than the reluctance that had characterized her social interactions under my roof. These people knew a version of her I had never met, or rather, had never allowed to exist. This was my daughter, unfiltered by my expectations, uninhibited by my judgment. Creative. What? Passionate, occasionally irreverent, deeply thoughtful, fiercely independent yet profoundly connected to a community that valued precisely the qualities I had tried to redirect. The exhibition was held in a converted industrial space, raw brick walls hung with student work ranging from traditional to experimental. My daughter led me through the displays, explaining techniques, introducing artists, her animation growing as we approached the section where her work was featured. I had seen digital images of the pieces during our video calls, but experiencing them physically was entirely different. The scale, the texture, the way light played across the surfaces, these elements couldn't be captured on a screen. One piece in particular caught me, a mixed media work that juxtaposed rigid geometric structures with organic forms breaking through, reaching toward light. The plaque beside it read simply, "Emergence." "This one," she said quietly, watching my face as I studied it. "This one is about us." I looked closer and saw what I had missed, that the geometric structures formed a protective cage, but also a prison. That the organic forms weren't destroying the structure but transforming it, incorporating elements while creating something new. It was beautiful and painful and hopeful all at once. "I see it now," I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I did, not just the symbolism in her art, but the larger truth it represented. How my attempts to protect had constrained. How her growth required breaking barriers I had thought essential. How true security comes not from external control but from internal strength. We stood together in silence, looking at her creation, her statement about our shared history and possible future. Around us, visitors moved from piece to piece, some pausing to study her work with appreciation. A teacher approached, complimented specific technical elements, asked thoughtful questions about her creative process. She answered with an authority and clarity that made my chest tight with a complex mixture of pride and regret. Later that night, over dinner at a small restaurant she had chosen, she asked the question that had been implicit throughout my visit. "Do you understand now?" Why I had to leave. I considered my answer carefully, resisting the impulse to qualify or rationalize. "Yes," I said finally. "I understand that I was trying to give you the safety I thought you needed, but what you needed was the freedom to find your own way. I was so afraid of you making mistakes that I became the biggest mistake in your life." She reached across the table and took my hand. The first time she had initiated physical contact since I arrived. "Not the biggest mistake," she said. "Just a complicated part of my story, of our story." That visit marked a turning point, but not an ending. The work of rebuilding continued after I returned home. We still had moments of tension, particularly when discussions turn to future plans. The ingrained urge to direct, to protect, to ensure security remained strong. But each time I try to catch myself, to remember the lesson of emergence, that growth often requires breaking old structures to create new ones. I began to make changes in my own life as well. For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in being her parent, specifically, the kind of parent who ensured success through careful management and control. With that role fundamentally altered, I found myself questioning other aspects of my carefully constructed existence. Had I chosen my career because it truly fulfilled me, or because it represented security and status? Were my friendships genuine connections or strategic alliances? Did my meticulously organized life reflect my actual preferences, or a fear of unpredictability? I started small. Took an art appreciation class at the local community college, partly to better understand her world, partly to explore something outside my usual sphere. Reconnected with my sister after years of minimal contact, listening with new openness to her perspective on our shared childhood and divergent paths. Allowed myself moments of spontaneity, a weekend trip without an itinerary, a dinner party without a planned menu, conversations that wandered rather than marched toward predetermined conclusion. These were modest steps, almost embarrassingly, so compared to the complete reinvention my daughter had undertaken. But they represented a genuine effort to practice in my own life what I was learning to offer her. The freedom to evolve, to explore, to sometimes fail on the path to authentic growth. My daughter noticed these changes during our calls, commented on my new activities with a mixture of surprise and cautious approval, asked questions that suggested she was adjusting her own understanding of me, just as I was adjusting my understanding of her. We were both learning to see each other as complete people, not just the roles we had occupied. A year after she left, I received an unexpected email. She had been offered an opportunity to participate in a prestigious workshop over her summer break, a significant recognition of her talent and potential. The timing would mean canceling the visit home we had tentatively planned. She was writing to discuss options, asking how I felt, rather than simply informing me of her decision. The old me would have framed it as a choice between family obligation and personal indulgence. Would have subtly or not so subtly pushed for the option that brought her home, back into the sphere of my influence. Would have interpreted any other choice as rejection. Instead, I found myself writing, "It sounds like an incredible opportunity. Of course you should accept it." And then, after a moment's reflection, I added, "What if I came to you instead? I could visit during the workshop, see you in action, meet your mentors. And maybe afterward, we could take that trip to the mountains you've mentioned wanting to explore." Her response came quickly. "Really? You'd do that?" The surprise in her question revealed how much history we still carried, how much healing remained to be done. But it was followed by enthusiasm for the plan and an openness that felt like progress. We video called that weekend to discuss details. As we talked, I noticed a sketchbook open on her desk, visible at the edge of the frame, filled with studies for a new project, figures in motion, reaching toward each other across divided spaces. "New work?" I asked, nodding toward the sketchbook. She glanced down, then deliberately turned the book so I could see it more clearly. "Early ideas. I'm exploring connection, reconciliation, the work of bridging distances." Our eyes met through the screen. In that moment, I understood that the distances between us, geographical, emotional, philosophical, were not failures but necessary spaces. Spaces that allowed us both to exist as whole individuals. Spaces that we could now choose to bridge, not through control or obligation, but through mutual respect and ongoing effort. "It's beautiful," I said. And this time, I really saw it. Aftermath. The continuing journey yesterday, she flew home for a brief visit before beginning her final year of study. I watched her descend the escalator at arrivals, still struck by how different she seems now. Confident, centered, radiating a quiet certainty about her place in the world. Not because everything has been easy. She has shared enough struggles to dispel that illusion, but because she has discovered her capacity to face difficulties on her own terms. As I helped her settle into her old room, now maintained as a guest room that honors who she has become rather than preserving who she once was, she paused before a photograph on the dresser. It shows the two of us at her exhibition, standing before emergence, both smiling somewhat tentatively at the camera. "We've come a long way since then," she observed. "We have," I agreed. "Though I think we still have a way to go," she nodded, understanding that the work of genuine relationship is never really finished. That trust damaged must be continuously rebuilt. that old patterns remained temptingly familiar, even when recognized as harmful. Later, over dinner at her favorite local restaurant, one I had always considered too bohemian, too impractical for regular patronage, she shared her plans for after graduation. Goals both ambitious and uncertain. Dreams that involve risk and possibility in equal measure. A future that looks nothing like the one I had once mapped out for her, but that fills her eyes with light when she describes it. I listened without attempting to redirect or revise. Offered thoughts when asked, support without condition. Practiced, still imperfectly but earnestly, the art of loving without controlling. As we drove home, she asked about my sister, if we still kept in touch, if our relationship had continued to improve. I told her about our monthly calls, the family history we had begun to re-examine together, the visit we were planning for the holidays. How strange and valuable it felt to reconnect with someone I had judged so harshly for so long. "I'm glad," she said simply. Then, after a contemplative pause, "You know, I used to think there were only two options: become exactly who you wanted me to be, or cut ties completely. I never imagined we could find this middle path." "Neither did I admitted. I thought love meant ensuring a specific outcome. I didn't understand it could also mean supporting someone on a journey to their own destination." This morning, I watched her unpack that single suitcase, still all she travels with, though its contents reflect a life far richer than I once feared she would have. Art supplies, books on subjects I'm only beginning to understand, mementos from places she has explored without my supervision or approval. Looking at these artifacts of her self-determined life, I finally recognized the fundamental truth I had missed for so long. The cage I built to protect her was also the cage that contained me, kept me trapped in rigid ideas of success, security, and proper paths. In liberating herself, she has also begun to liberate me. We are both works in progress, separate canvases with distinctive styles, but influencing each other in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The future remains unwritten, our relationship continuing to evolve with each genuine conversation, each moment of vulnerability, each choice to see and honor who the other truly is. I never thought I'd be the villain in my own child's story, but I've learned that stories can be rewritten. Characters can evolve. And sometimes the most profound growth begins with the painful recognition of our own mistakes.